in August, and I hope we don't have to close again. And I'll still come and visit you if you invite me, but let's hope the church doesn't have to close. We can have worship every week now, because you can't beat being in a church. Really, I've led services on Zoom. I had some strange service on the telephone that I led for a church somewhere. And there's nothing like God's people being in God's house to worship. I'm sure you all agree with that, so let's hope it can continue. But we have been told that Christmas this year will be rather different from what we're used to. And some people might welcome that, of course. No, I can't have anybody around, I'm self-isolating. Sorry about that. Some people would welcome it. Many people will find it quite distressing, I think. But one unexpected thing that happened this year as a result of the lockdown in November was that people started to prepare for Christmas even earlier than they usually did. You notice that? Got Christmas cards earlier, lights going up. You can't blame people for that because there wasn't much that you could do, so you could put up a tree and some lights. And one can understand that. And of course, every year, pandemic or no pandemic, every year during the season of Advent, people are building up their expectations of Christmas. And for many people, Christmas has already started by the time we get to Advent Sunday, the season of Advent. And it's good during the season of Advent to look at the themes of Advent and not to look at the themes of Christmas, not until a lot nearer anyway. I'm sure I told you this before, but the season of Christmas actually starts on Christmas Day and goes on then until the 2nd of February. Now, people don't like to hear that. They've been celebrating it all through Advent and before, and they wanted it to move on. But Christmas starts with Christmas Day, and it's a shame to celebrate Christmas too early because then we get fed up with it really before it's even arrived, and that is a great shame. One of the great themes of Advent, of course, is the second coming of Jesus Christ. The passage in Mark 13 that Dinah read for us is about the second coming of Jesus Christ. And when you see that as the title of a passage in the Bible, Signs of the End of the Age, you know you're in for a fun time. No doubt we'd all prepare to stick to the easy parts, but we have to deal with the difficult parts of the Bible as well as the easy ones. And of course, before we can have a second coming, there has to be a first coming. That's what Christmas celebrates. And that's what our Old Testament reading from Isaiah is about. It's one of many passages in the Old Testament that call upon God to intervene, to come down. For centuries, the Jewish people believed that God would intervene in the world in some way. They expected he would come in judgment. Our reading from Isaiah is one expression of this. We can tell from the language used that Isaiah expected the coming of God to this world to be a tumultuous event. Oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down, that the mountains would tremble before you. Isaiah 64 and verse 1. Now, Isaiah was writing about 700 years before the birth of Jesus. And clearly he didn't expect a tiny baby to be born of a peasant girl in a stable. And just as many ideas about the first coming of Christ were wrong, so many of our ideas about the second coming are probably wrong as well. And when we deal with what the Bible teaches about the second coming of Jesus Christ, we can only draw out some very general truths. It's wise not to go into details, but there are three things that we can be reasonably certain of. Firstly, the future is uncertain, and there's no better example of that, is there, than this ongoing coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic. Which of us thought 12 months ago, when you came to church in Advent, getting ready for Christmas, looking ahead to 2020, which of us thought that 2020 would turn out as it has? We really didn't have a clue, did we? And who knows how the pandemic will end? We don't really know that either, do we? We've had encouraging news about vaccines, and we should give thanks for that. And that certainly gives us hope that that we might be able to control the virus as we get into next year. But nobody really knows, do they? Now, God didn't cause the pandemic. It'd be wrong to say that. It's another mismanagement of his creation by humanity. But even without the coronavirus, the future remains uncertain. Climate change, international relations, population changes, all these things and more were creating great uncertainty, and they'll continue to do so. Whatever the future may hold for us, for our families, friends, our church, our world, we can't possibly know. Put the future in God's hands, friends. We'll drive ourselves mad otherwise. So that's the first point then. The future is uncertain. Incidentally, if you're using this order of service, there's some notes on the back, but I have contributed my own mistake to this order of service, because if you look at point 2, there's a line in there that says the second coming will happen. It tells us of the things we need for a fruitful harvest. Well, that's actually left over from the order of service from October, if you were here then. And I've done what many of you have probably done, and I've copied a document and edited it, but not well enough. So if you think, what's it going on about harvest for? Has he lost it? That's my mistake. So there we are. Put my hands up to it. Nobody else's. So cross that out, and we can carry on. So there we are. The future is uncertain. We don't, even as a world, as an international community, we don't control things that we could control. And certainly we can't control when Jesus will return, even if we wanted to. And it follows then that any speculation about Jesus' return, about when it will happen, is completely pointless. Let's remind ourselves in Mark's Gospel, verses 26 and 27. Mark chapter 13. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. And here we have some of Jesus' teaching about the second coming, his return in glory. And so far as the second coming is concerned, there are two things we can be quite sure about. Firstly, it's an essential part of Christian doctrine and belief, and it will happen. Secondly, nobody knows when. Well, God does, of course, but nobody else knows. Perhaps the key verse in Mark 13 is verse 32. Of the second coming, Jesus says, "No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father." There's a verse to keep hold of. What a statement that is. No one knows when Jesus will return, including Jesus himself. People today are understandably a bit sceptical about predictions. There's a lot of predictions made about the future. We're told, for example, that global warming will lead to climate change, which could have huge consequences for human life on this planet. Now, I believe that global warming is a reality, mainly because respected organisations such as Christian Aid and others concerned with the developing world, they clearly believe that it's an issue. But if you happen to be sceptical about it, that's quite understandable, because so many predictions turn out not to be true. Be very wary of anyone who claims to know when Jesus will return, because as Jesus himself says, Mark 13 verse 32, no one knows. No one knows. That's the words of Jesus Christ. And if Jesus didn't know, if Matthew, Mark, Luke and John didn't know, if St. Paul didn't know, why then would anyone else? So we've said all that. We've seen that the future is uncertain. We've seen that speculation about Jesus' return is pointless. And having said that, we should, this is the third point, this is the last point, we should always be prepared for Jesus to return. The second coming of Jesus Christ is an essential part of our faith. It could happen at any time. As Jesus says, therefore keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight, or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. And it would be good for each one of us to live our life as if Jesus Christ is going to return tomorrow. It would mean a big difference in the way we live our life, because it's always good to be prepared for something to happen. When I worked on the London Underground many years ago, we had a chief operating manager who was a bit of a character. He worked his way up in the organisation, and he often on a Friday would go out onto the network and just sort of surprise people, see what they were doing, see whether they were standing up straight, see if they were wearing the full uniform, all these things. But he never wanted anyone to know where he was going. And he said he would be very cross if we had told people where he was, because he wanted to, surprise them. And often something that is done randomly, unannounced, it's a pain in the backside if you're on the receiving end of it, but it is quite effective at keeping standards up. And for much more significant reasons, it will be good for us to live our lives as if Jesus Christ is going to return tomorrow. And he could, friends. What's it all mean for us then? Well, we learn from Jesus himself that no one knows when the end of human history will occur. No one knows, not even Jesus. So don't let us waste time speculating about it. Secondly, Jesus will return at the end of history. Christ will come to be the final judge. Christ will separate the righteous from the evil. There will be a final judgment, and Christ will be the judge. We can leave passing judgment on other people to him. And the final important question that we all have to ask ourselves, and we should all ask ourselves, how are we to live today? Well, we should live our lives as if Jesus Christ were coming back tomorrow, as if we are going to meet Jesus face to face tomorrow. If Jesus Christ were coming back tomorrow, what would I do? What would you do today? That's a question each one of us can only answer for ourselves. And we should answer it in the light of the challenge gives us in Mark 13, verses 33 and 37. Be on guard, be alert, watch. Amen.